Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our webinar today, which is Q&A session with David Book. These are always very informative, lots and lots of information. We'll give you a chance to ask your questions, and David will do his best to answer them for you. I'm sharing David's screen right now. What I'm going to do is unmute everybody's microphone. Please mute on your end so that we can cut down on the background noise if for whatever reason you can't mute or don't mute and it cuts into the session, we will mute you on this end. But in the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and mute you. And hello, David.
Hi, Warren.
Hi. I can start out today's session by telling you I've already got a handful of questions to ask you. So
That's good. There's not usually a shortage, that's for sure. And sometimes, well, not sometimes, pretty much all the time, one question will lead to another question and to another question. So we can start off with what you have, and then as folks raise their hands, we can just kind of take it in whatever direction we need to go.
Okay. Well, some of the people that were asking the question are actually on here right now. So I'm still unmuting people as we go through here.
Yeah, usually when you start clicking the unmute button, we start getting everybody's noise.
All right. Well, let me start out with MYSPS. MYSPS asks the question, is it possible to remove or deactivate installed plugins? I mainly use self-hosted. However, there are some instances where I still use buzztouch.com. Of course, I know that I can remove the plugins manually after downloading the archive. Just wondering if in the future it's possible to remove installed plugins.
Yeah, that's a good question. And so there's two answers to that. Let me log into my account here, and we'll talk about the two answers are there's a different procedure for this, whether you're running self-hosted or the buzztouch.com hosted. And so I've got my BuzzTouch hosted panel here on what I'm calling the right, and I've got my self-hosted panel here on the left. So let's start with the self-hosted panel. And on the self-hosted panel, adding and removing plugins is a function of an administrator. So when we go to an administrator and we have the manage plugins option on the left, then what you can do is display the list of plugins that are installed on this self-hosted software. And what you can do from here is you can select one of these plugins and then you can remove it. So you use this delete plugin option up here. So that's a really good question. But on the buzztouch.com panel, it's a little bit different. On this one here, in my account, it shows me all the plugins that I've installed as a list. And there is not right now an easy way, well, there's no way for you guys to actually click on one and delete it. And so we actually got to kind of thinking about how we might do that. And the reason for that is most of the time, you've probably paid for that plugin. So if you've paid for it and then you remove it, then you've got some kind of issues there in terms of what will happen. But there's another kind of fundamental flaw with this whole system that we're trying to work out, and that is when I go to package the source code for my app, I go to the download source code screen, every single plugin that's in my control panel that I've installed on my control panel is going to be included in this project, even if my screens and actions for this project don't use a particular plugin. And we've had a bunch of discussions about this, and there's kind of pros and cons of each way. So these are all the screens I've added to this app. So if I add a new screen, I have my long list of plugins. The reason that we include them all in the download right now is so that if you come back later after your application's already been compiled and published, you can add something to it and it already exists in your package. That way you don't have to recompile. But what we're learning is as the list of plugin grows, or the list of plugins grows, and people are adding more and more and more of them to their control panels, then these downloads are getting pretty big, and oftentimes you end up with a lot of different packages in your download that you aren't even going to use. And so that's a little bit problematic. So what we're hoping to do, and this is just kind of one idea, is when you go to the download source code page, We might give you an advanced choice here with a series of checkboxes to not include plugins that aren't being used in this particular app. And of course, that introduces other questions, but that was one solution to try to keep you from deleting them from your control panel, because once you delete them from your control panel, there's a bunch of other stuff beyond that. So to kind of back up and summarize what I'm saying, on the buzztouch.com site, you can't remove a control panel right now for a bunch of technical reasons, and we're trying to figure out a good solution. So it's definitely on our to-do list. So good question. And so you want to take the next one, or should we go to Niraj's here?
Well, Niraj had already sent me his questions in advance, but I'll go ahead and forward them to you since Niraj is on the call, and you can follow up with him.
Perfect, perfect. Yeah, Niraj is asking a good question. He's saying, and hi Niraj, it's good to see you, by the way, or good to hear from you, I guess.
Hey there, how's it going?
It's going good. He's saying, well, how do we resolve, is there an efficient way of resolving the warnings for iOS 6 projects? There are 50 plus warnings of deprecated usages. So the short answer is you shouldn't have to. The long answer is I would be willing to bet that the project that you've downloaded was downloaded quite a while ago, or is using some older versions of plugins. I say that because we do a lot of testing here, and I'm opening up Xcode right now to make sure I'm working on a current project. But if I open up Xcode and I open up a project here, you shouldn't have any warnings. And so the interesting thing is what are they for? What are those warnings showing you? If I open up this project here, let's just make sure we're on the same page in terms of like the version of Xcode and all that kind of stuff. So I'm running Xcode 4.5.2, which is presumably what we hope everybody else is running. In the build settings, oftentimes the build settings, if you change those, you'll produce different warnings. So in the build settings, you want to build this for an iOS 3.0 deployment target. Other than that, do you have a couple examples of some of these deprecated warnings?
Yeah, let me go into build settings for a minute, and I think, yeah, my target is 6.0, so that's my mistake then.
No, it's okay. See, that's a great talking point. Like, watch this. If I change this to 6.0 and I hit build, well, first I'll clean. You're exactly right. So if I hit build, oops, still cleaning. Okay, so the clean, if I hit build now that I've got a 6.0 deployment target, which is, we'll talk about in a second why that's a little bit problematic anyway. I've got a ton of plugins in here. And let's see what, I'm guessing I'm going to see a bunch of warnings that you're seeing about deprecated, just like you're saying. Yep, here they all are. So what ends up happening is a lot of this stuff isn't available or plans to be removed as iOS moves forward. And so a lot of these little methods, dismiss modal view controller animated, they're saying that that's deprecated. A lot of the add banner stuff. And so over time, yeah, we'll need to remove a lot of that stuff from the core project. The reason that we want you to stick with the iOS 3 deployment target is not just so that you can avoid those warnings. And this is kind of interesting here too, by the way. Notice I don't have 3 left. And this kind of brings up the other question, is 3 is not in the checklist because I'm using the newer model of Xcode. So it's one of those catches where if you change it, it's hard to change it back. So this thing here, let's see if I can go back here. I think that's where we want to go. You got to do it manually in the P list. No, that's not it. Can't remember now. I get jumping around. But because I have a newer version of Xcode, it's not even giving me that old option. So when you download it, you should have that old option still, but if you change it, you get kind of stuck. So
if we stay on 4.3, would that be reasonable? level?
Yeah, I haven't looked in a while, but if the warnings bother you, yeah, you're just going to need to go backwards in time so that you can support a lot of those older devices. Again, their warnings are not really hurting anything, but they are annoying, that's for sure. Let me find, yeah, so I've switched this and now I can't switch it back, but I'm going to talk on your next question here in 1 sec. Yeah, why can't I change this? I can't remember what there's a way to manually type it in. It's been a while since I've done it.
Can you try just double clicking on it and typing there?
Yeah, it won't let me.
Okay.
And different machines use different have a list of different options here based on what SDK you have installed. This was on the forum all the time too. I'm kind of embarrassed that I can't answer it. Okay, so the base SDK, we want to use the 6.0 SDK so we can take advantage of some of the newer stuff, the newer features. But we want to go 3.0 on the deployment target. And now I can't switch it back. If anybody remembers the trick, shout, speak up.
David, explain the discrepancy. We want to use the iOS 6 SDK, but yet target older devices, so will it degrade gracefully?
It's not a question of degrading. Well, it is a question of degrading gracefully. Let me give you an example. Let's say, for example, that you wanted to use, I don't know, the Twitter framework in your project. And if you're using the Twitter framework, as we all know, that didn't exist, let's just say a year ago. So the older devices won't support the Twitter framework, but because you can write code that checks for the device version, then it doesn't break the compiler. Does that make any sense?
Yeah.
So it is problematic, and one of the things that all of us developers are constantly dealing with is how far back do we go in our claims to support these things. And really, it probably is time for us to go back through this and find those methods that are deprecated and rewrite the code, whatever they are. And each one's going to be different, right? Like, show animated view controller. If that's deprecated, then there's going to be some new method call, and we got to get in the documentation and find the new method call. So that's how you fix them, is you find the new, quote unquote, the new way or the new method that Apple's now embracing. I'm seeing that you're asking about the Remember Together, menu. Let's go to that before I figure out this 3.0 thing. I don't want to waste a bunch of time with figuring out how to change that again. I can't believe I don't remember. It's just one of those things. Remember Together, Niraj is asking about this secret little menu that we have on Remember Together app that I've been working on and trying to get released. I got so many different things going on. Let me bring it up on my screen, and I'll show you what he's referring to. The question is, can this be turned into a plugin? Yeah, you could turn it into a plugin. Let me explain how it works first, and maybe somebody wants to take that on, or maybe we can, or something like that. It's both complicated and not complicated, depending on how you look at it. So let's get the simulator going here. Okay, so here's the Remember Together app, and what Niraj is talking about is this menu here that kind of shows up behind this front menu. So you can see that it's kind of slidden over to the right. Some people will call that like a peekaboo menu or something like that. And when we add a book to when we add a scrapbook, then what we'll want to do is show that book when the menu shows up. So to answer your question, the way that this works is this menu here is a view that's behind. Technically, it's not behind. It's more off the screen to the left. It's off to the screen to the left. And it's a view that we're sliding onto the screen as we move this view off the screen. And so we're animating this one to the right, and we're animating this one to the left, to the right also. And then we're stopping this one just short of the width, the device's width, so that we can see that it still exists. And this one is in essence on top of this one still. So it's kind of a slick little trick. And this one here doesn't move to the left until after it's hidden so that it looks right. We want to just kind of cover it up, and then now it's sliding to the left. And as soon as I hit the button, it's going to slide in behind, and then this one's going to disappear. So the way that that's working is technically not too difficult. I think it would be a neat plug-in because you could have a picture or some controls here, and then you could have a menu of sorts underneath it. So the technical part would be what would display underneath it. Do you have child items like a list of things, or do you have buttons? It really could be anything. In essence, it would kind of be like two plugins in one, right? You'd have like the top screen, and then what would you have on the bottom screen, and the control panel would allow you to change that. And so Niraj is saying, hey, I might be willing to try pull this off. That would be fun. There's a couple different ways to do it. I would explore. Let me show you here real quick. That's what we call the library view controller. I'm going to paste. Let's see if I can paste this here. There's one called show books, show scrapbooks maybe. Is that the method? No. What's the method we click? Yeah, here we go. So this is the little animation block that runs if the main menu is this. If the main menu is not showing, then we run this little animation block. If the main menu is showing, we run this little animation block. In essence, what we're doing is just reversing them. So to walk through this, we're finding the rectangle that's surrounding the library view. The library view is in essence this whole screen here. So this is the library. So we're finding the rectangle, and then we're moving that rectangle 280 units to the right. So the phone's 320 wide. So if you'll see, if you move it 280, you'll leave the 20 behind, so you can still see it, which is kind of cool. And then we're hiding the scroll view, which is this book scroll view here. We're hiding that so that it doesn't show. I was a little bit wrong. I thought this was animating on the screen too, but apparently this is always just sitting here in the back. So if it's showing, we animate it this direction, and if it's not showing, we just reverse that. We just go minus the 280. So plus the 280 for the frame, the rectangle, the core graphics rectangle. We're just moving this view. So it's pretty simple in terms of the code. I think the complex part would be how in the world are you going to do, how are you going to get the control panel to manage the two different screens? And I can see that control panel getting complex. We can come back to that in a little bit. Oh, go ahead.
Would the control panel simply just have two major sections, meaning the top layer view and then the underneath view?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. I think what I would do, let's look at a screen for a typical thing here. If I go to screens on this panel here and I look at, let's say we had a menu, I would probably have, yeah, just like you said, these top two, like the nickname and the nav bar, that would probably be the generalized settings, and I would have a big header here that says, peekaboo menu, and you would control all of the rows in the, secret menu, so to speak, if it was going to be a menu back here. So you could let the users add and remove rows to these. And then down here you might have, top screen. Depending on what you have on the top screen, you just have a different section. And then your JSON data for this screen would understand how to create the UI for this part and how to create the UI for this part. And then your plugin's logic, if you chose, when you tapped on one of the items on the bottom menu, and what you would want to do is slide the appropriate view in and not expose this again, right? That would be the challenging part, is are you going to let them put anything in that list? Because if you can put anything in the list, you're going to have to work out the logic how to get rid of this and introduce the new view controller for the new plugin, whatever they're loading. Like, what if this one loaded a quiz, right?
Right.
Like, preferences, for example. What if that loaded a quiz? You'd have to figure out how to get rid of this thing and load in the new view controller. And again, anything's possible. It's just a matter of how your animations are going to work and how your view controllers are going to work. But that's how I would do it. Yeah, that's a great question. Hey, before we leave that topic, does anybody know that's in the chat room, so I don't have to dig up the docs, how to change the deployment target by hand? I know I've done this 100 times. I just can't remember how to do it. Jump in the comments if you figure that out. I'm going to go to the next question and we'll revisit that because that's going to happen to a lot of us. Okay, so Tim's saying, hey, can you walk us through the self-hosted upgrade process step by step, and preferably using a standard FTP client like Filezilla? Sure. And hi, Tim, by the way. I'm glad to see your name in here. I haven't talked to you in a while. One of my pals in Chicago. Tim, if you guys don't know Tim, he's like super cool. Tim is ATRAIN in the forums. Dude, like, gets it. Okay, so I haven't used Filezilla in a while. Let me cancel this updated stuff. I'm not a Filezilla fan, but that's okay if you are. So let's look at a couple of things here. First off, we have a bunch of files that are in the self-hosted package Tim's going to be updating here shortly. So those files, I'm going to get rid of this thing on my screen. I got a lot of stuff going on. Those files are right here. So we're going to want to overwrite on our existing server everything that we have installed except the files folder, and that's because the files folder contains projects and applications and things that are not stuff that we want to replace. So let's see here. He's asking again, can you walk us through collecting the user's location so that we could build a user map on self-hosted? Okay, yeah, we'll talk about that in just a sec. So first things first, we'll stay on the self-hosted idea. So let's say that we have on our local machine here, you know, locally, well, I'm going to have to connect to a server, so I think Filezilla uses Site Manager. A bunch of different sites I have on here. I haven't used this in a long time. But we would connect, let's connect to, I don't even know if these aren't even valid anymore, so I can't do this. Well, so the Filezilla thing is going to be up to you, Tim. I don't have a server to connect to right now, and I'm not going to dig up my notes for passwords and all that kind of stuff. But really what you're going to do is replace everything on your server except the files directory. Then you're going to revisit the install screen. And so maybe I need to actually demonstrate how to transfer files using FTP, but I just wasn't prepared to do that, and so I don't want to dig up a bunch of passwords and all that stuff in this webinar. I'll just get kind of lost. But you need to take your Filezilla client or whatever FTP program you use, go to the Site Manager, File, Site Manager. You would, add a new site. So you type in your FTP information, name the site, and you'd connect. And then what you'd have is your local files on the left and your remote files on the right, and you would just drag those files onto your server. In fact, Warren, let's do that. Let's do a whole webinar just for how to use FTP clients. That's not a bad topic. Okay. It's just, I think, a little bit out of the scope of, like, I think it'd take us an hour to actually demonstrate step by step how to do FTP clients. So hopefully that helped you, Tim. I don't want to just kind of leave you in the dark, but you're going to be replacing everything in your install on your server except the files directory. And it's interesting, actually, your download, the download that you have, won't even have a files directory. It should be empty. So to try to help you accidentally, or to try to prevent you from accidentally overwriting things. Okay, so Tim's next question. Can you walk us through collecting the user's location so that we could build a better user map on self-hosted? Sure. And he's also saying, or is it possible that the user map will be added as a feature to self-hosted? Yeah, the reason that the user map right now is not in the self-hosted panel, there's a couple different reasons for that. We'll start with your second question, then we'll go to your first question. There's a lot of people that are running this open source software for, let's just say, kind of to solve interesting problems, and problems we'd never even really imagined that they would be doing. there's people running businesses out of this. There's people, you know, in essence trying to, you know, create better app builders and BuzzTouch, you know, competitors and all kinds of things like that, which is, we just kind of giggle when we see that stuff. But the reason that we don't have the usage map in the menu for one of the applications is a license thing, right? It requires Google's kind of blessing. You got to go to the Google API page and get an API key for the map, and depending on what the terms of license are and depending on what you're using the self-hosted for, something as simple as a control panel that shows a map, the terms of the license change based on who you are. So really all this is a web page, and it's pulling a bunch of data, and it's showing a bunch of pins on the map, which is the same thing we do on the Buzz map, right? We show a bunch of data, a bunch of pins. So what you're talking about doing is creating a couple of different things. You're going to, in your self-hosted panel, you're going to create a web page, probably called, you know, BT usage map. So you'd put a link over here on the left, BT usage map, and then you're going to go to Google and you're going to get an API key and you're going to agree to their terms and conditions, which will probably say things like, hey, you can't charge people money, you know, to use that feature, or, you know, you're supposed to be a free site, or all these different kind of things, and you're going to agree. But I'm happy to share that, the map code that we're using now with you, Tim, or we can post that on the site, or maybe we can figure out a way to include it in the download, and then just you enter your own API key or something like that. That's probably a good idea. We'll have to revisit that. We'll have to revisit that. In fact, I'll rely on you, Tim, to send me an email that says, hey, where's that map? Because we already wrote the screen. It's just a matter of getting it in the self-hosted. And then as far as the back end goes, how are you going to collect the data that shows on the map? That's a great question. So you already are, actually. If your users, if you're using the control panel the way it's intended, and you go to your database, the database has, on your self-hosted panel, has a field called API requests. And the API requests table, these are all the fields, holds the device model, latitude, longitude, the application ID. So if we go back to this example on the buzztouch.com site, this is not related to app usage. This is related to logins, but really these are just lat and longitude pairs. And then on the bubble, we're showing the person who logged in, but you could show the name of the app and the location, the latitude and longitude, just like we do in the self-host, or just like on the buzztouch.com site. So you're already getting all of the data. So it's more of a question of the query that you have to run to build the location feed for the map, and that's kind of how Google Maps works. Google Maps works as you give them a list of locations to show on the map, to plot on the map, device latitude and device longitude, or how you do that. So let me give you an example. If we view source on the public Buzz map, and you know what, let me go to an application. That'll be better. That'll be a little bit better example. So if I go to my applications, let's see if I can go to one that's got, you know, some views that have some map information. I'm so oftentimes doing this on the testing server that I end up without any locations. Yeah, there's no locations on these. Let me find one with a location data. Let's see here. Test conserve. Does that have location data? Nah, darn it. But anyway, let's view the source of this, and I'll show you how we're producing these map locations. All we're doing, this is all the map logic. All we're doing is we're hitting a URL on our server. It's in here. Maybe I'm wrong. Yeah. Let me go back up here. No, it's not in here like I thought it was. Oh well. Yeah, so we're hitting a URL on our server, and we're producing the list of maps, and that URL is a PHP script that might sound something like this. Hey, go to the API request table get me all the API requests where there's a latitude and a longitude, join the applications table so that we can get the name of the application, produce the JSON, show it on the map. So good question. That could be fun. Control panel extensions like that are super cool. Let me make sure I answered the questions here. Okay, so we didn't talk about collecting the user's locations. So how do you collect the user's locations? That's already happening in the API requests, but you could also do it in, a bunch of different other ways. Any screen that uses a data URL, let me go back to a screen here. Any screen that uses a data URL, you can add merge fields to the screen data URL. So when you're working with these URLs, you can add merge fields for the device's location, and depending on your priorities and your goals, you can do all kinds of crazy things with that. So let's say that we wanted to say device latitude equals, we would just type in here device latitude and device longitude. And what I'm doing is I'm telling the software, I'm telling my app, oops, typo, I can't type today. I'm telling my app that before you use this data URL to power this menu, add the device latitude and the device longitude to the end of it. That way, and this is just one simple strategy, the app owner or the person running the control panel could say, hey, whenever this menu loads, save this device latitude and device longitude. And now what you can do is change your query a little bit. We go back to the database. I'll show you here. If you change your query a little bit, you could say something like this. Hey, go get me all the locations that have a latitude and have a longitude, or maybe you can say, with this device model or from that particular screen, right? So the creativity is kind of endless. I've been waiting for somebody to build a plugin that's going to show all the usage in the app, which is kind of cool. So let's revisit. We could talk about maps and maps and maps, but let's keep going with these questions here so we can come, and we'll come back depending on how much time we have. John Wilson, who happens to be on the call also, and we can talk to John if he's here, was expecting a release date for 2.8 to be happening already. I know the plan was for last week, just wondering. Yeah, that's a completely fair question. We're definitely like stressed out and going 1,000 miles around here because we had intended on having not only the self-hosted release by now, but we also intended on having the push notifications supported by now on buzztouch.com. And so the order hasn't changed. What we're trying to do is get push notifications, this functionality, on the buzztouch.com site. We've already begun that process. I put a message in the forum last night about how you're going to see, some users are going to see some of this stuff today. And then after this is on the buzztouch.com site for our members, and it's kind of worked out, there's always going to be kinks, then we'll roll this 2.8 out, or 2.1.8 out. And so that's the whole problem with developers, right? Everybody wants a date, and we do the very best we can to push it out, but it never fails. We never make them. It's frustrating. So thank you for the patience, John. I wish it was right this very moment, but we're just not quite there yet. And then LA, back to LA. I didn't see LA's question. Did he post something in here, Warren?
Yeah, he did. Hold on, let me get it for you.
Yeah, I'm not seeing it.
It says, okay, let me just read it to you. It says, can you show or explain how to change the fields in self-hosted backend for a specific plugin? For example, top nav bar, but adding something.
Change the fields.
LA's on the call if you want to ask him directly.
Yeah, LA, I can. If you're there, let's revisit that question. I'm not quite sure what you're asking.
Hey, David.
Hi, LA.
How are you today?
I'm well.
Okay, so I went back to your link when you did My Cool plugin, and you showed how to add the value on top of the control panel and self-hosted. How can we change that on the back end? If I want to add something to the control panel.
Hang on one sec. Whoever's got the jazz music on, let's turn that off. There we go. Okay, so go. I'm sorry about that.
Hey, I don't mind a little jazz every now and then.
I didn't mind it. I liked it. I just couldn't hear you. Okay, so you're talking about as a programmer then, not as a user, but as making a new plugin?
Right.
Okay,
let's say I got a plugin, and I'm testing it. I upload to my self-hosted, and I want to add a couple fields in my control panel.
Got it.
That would be particular. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So let's do this.
I guess that's done in the index, correct?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So let's look at a simple one here. Let's look at the HTML plugin, and I'll show you exactly how this works. So you have an index page. This is the page for every single plugin that the user sees. Right now I'm on the index page for the menu simple. And so the reason I know that is because there's no file name right here, but I could put index.php right there, and it's the same file. So the index page is what the user works with on every plugin. So in your plugins folder, that's always going to have the same name, index.php. And then when you also look in your plugin folder, you have a save underbar json.php. So those two work together, and I'll explain that, and then I'll show you what I mean. So right now, if I update the screen nickname on this plugin, when I hit save, this whole page is not going to reload. We're not going to refresh this whole page. But instead, I'm going to send all of the choices here, every choice, whether they're shown or hidden or not, I'm going to send them all to this save.json script or file. And it's going to do the saving in the database and then return the results. So if I hit save, you'll see here that these are the results returned or printed or outputted by this save JSON page. So that's kind of technically what's happening. So every time you hit save, you're sending all of these entries in these form fields to the back end. So we're saying save. So let's explore kind of how that's working now. So how does it know what to save? Which is kind of the question you're asking. You know, what if I had a field in here called, I don't know, favorite jazz musician, and your plugin needed to know what the name of the favorite jazz musician was. So you'd need a couple of different things. The first thing you would need is you'd need a way to show the user an option for the favorite jazz musician. So one way to do that, and the easiest way to do that, is just to look at all the other options in an existing plugin, and you'll see that they're all kind of separated with these bands. And so this is like the login choices. This is the background color choices. So each one of these sections, I call them bands. Each one of these bands, some of them are quite long, some of them are quite short, represent one of these sections in the index page. So this one, this one, this one, this one, this one. So you might have a new section. And so what I would do is I would just copy an existing one. I'll just copy the login one. And then I would paste it. In this case, it'll be, I'm going below, so it would show up below the login, which is right here. So I'm going to paste one right after that, but above the background color section. I'm going to paste this here. Now I have two. Got this one that I just copied, this one that I just pasted. So I'm going to change this. I'm going to put favorite band properties, or favorite musician. What did we call it? So if this is our favorite musician section, we probably don't want it to say, hey, require login. That's the text that's showing right here. We probably want it to say something like favorite musician. So that text will show on the link. And then when we click that link, we don't want to show the box called box login, which is right here. Remember, we copy and pasted. So I'm going to call this box musician. And when I click this link, I'm going to expose or show this musician box. So what is inside of our musician box will depend. It's probably not going to be a form called JSON login required. Maybe we want to show a, choose or enter your musician's name. I don't know. Put that in bold just for fun. And then under that, maybe we put a text box. So this is just HTML. And the ID and the name of this text box is like important. I'll show you what I mean here in just a sec. So you see how this one's prefixed with the word JSON underscore and then the name of the property? All of these in this whole file, they start with JSON and then they name the property. There's tons of them in here. They start with JSON and then they name the property. So we want a property in our plugin called favorite musician. So let's name the form field favorite musician. And that's the ID and the name. And then when the screen loads, we need to show the current value from the database, right? We don't want to show a blank box. We want to show them what they'd already entered. So you can just look at one of these other text fields and I'll show you this little trick. But basically what you're saying is, go back down here to our favorite musician section. What we're saying is the value that should be displayed is the current value for favorite musician. So this is a little routine that's built into the self-hosted panel that says, hey, go get the value for the field favorite musician and put it in this box so that when the screen loads, it shows it like the nickname, right? We got to show the value that they entered last time. If we were refreshing the page, we wouldn't have to do that, but this page isn't going to reload when I hit click save. It's just going to save it. So that's how you show the current value. And when I click the submit button, I want the results to display directly under the button that I click. So I need to rename this box here. Instead of login, I'm going to name this musician. And then when I click save, I want to save the musician thing here. And that's basically it. So all we did, just to kind of recap, is we added a section. I wonder if I can upload this. I'm going to see if I can do this to an actual one and see if I can. Let's see if we can add one right into this list. I got two.
Are you hear me, voice?
Yeah, I can hear somebody, but hang on one second, okay? Warren's telling me I got a typo. Ha. Okay, let's go to the self-hosted server and actually do this on a live screen. This one's installed here. Let's go to, not sure if my plugins are overwritable or not, but let's see. Let's go to the menu list. I should have done this in the beginning. I was on the wrong machine. Okay, so here's our index for menu list. Let's add it underneath the require login like we wanted. We'll scroll down to require login. It's way down here. Where's my login section? Those are the existing items. Data URL, list layout, list height. Okay, here's login. So we're going to stick this down here. Warren says I have a typo somewhere. Musician. Oh, favorite. I do have a typo. So favorite musician is the name of our field. I'm going to save this. And let's see if I can go to this page here. Now, right now, menu simple. Am I on the right screen here? Oh, I don't have permission to write on this server, darn it. Yeah, I didn't realize I was going to be connected to a bunch of servers today. So I don't have the, I got to get into the back end and allow this FTP client to write on this machine, which I didn't do. I hope that answers your question, though. So what would end up happening is really, to recap what we did, we just added some HTML and predicated it with the word JSON for the field name, and that'll add it to our JSON data, and you would see favorite musician right here and the value that the user entered. I got to get into
that totally helps out.
I got to get FTP stuff going again. Yeah, sorry I couldn't actually update that on the machine there. I wasn't planning on doing that, and I should have been. My bad.
So basically what you're doing is copying the JSON values, the JSON, and just enter HTML.
Yeah, that's exactly right. There's just two pieces to it. There's the HTML input, collection method. That's just straight HTML, and that lets the user enter something. And then the save script